started with someone giving a presentation or a couple of our speakers giving presentations, and at the end, we don't have enough time to engage and discuss. So we'll be doing it differently this time around. We will actually just go straight into the panel discussion, and we will just have an engagement of some sort instead of sitting through slides and being spoken to instead of engaging with the actual speakers themselves. So without wasting any time, I would actually like to welcome our panelists for today. I will not introduce them individually. We'll get to know them as we start engaging with them. So if you could please all welcome our speakers to the front. Okay, we'll just give them time to finish putting up that again.
You need the branding.
Yeah. Now that I look at that, I just feel like, wow, look at our little banner over here. But it's okay, we'll make our own just as big. It's fine. Okay, well, then you should add us to your banner. Okay, so throughout this week, we've had a lot of sessions that we're talking about development. By a show of hands in the audience, do any of us know what development is and what it means? By a show of hands. Just one? Okay, I'm so glad that a lot of people don't have their hands up. So that means that we're just here to learn about this topic and then also just engage about what it means when we talk about development, because all of the sessions I attended all have different things to say. So even I was a bit confused, like, okay, what exactly it is that we're talking about? So to basically give us an introduction to what development is and what the SDGs are, and all of those things, I'd like to welcome Ms. Kalnisha Singh, and she will introduce herself to us, tell us what she does, and then also just give us background on what development is and this topic that we'll be discussing today. Hi everyone. This is fun.
I'm so intimidated. I'm a development economist. I work in the space of firstly theorizing and then implementing development strategies around underserved, marginalized communities predominantly, but also advising on the intersection of capitalism and development, which is a horrible intersection, but we will get more into it. There's lots of interesting narrative around what development is, but from an economist perspective, and the surreal scientists roll their eyes because economics is a social science, very flawed and has lots of flawed assumptions. But from an economic point of view, all economics is the theory of how to allocate resources, right? Allocate constrained resources. And that's the sort of academic definition of what that really means from a human perspective, is that as humans, we thrive when we have agency and when we have choice. And so economic development, or any development, is the process through which we attain agency so as to have choice. Choice of what to eat, choice of where to live, how to be educated. So it is really about expanding access to choice, option. And that's what development is. The sustainable development goals are interesting because it's like if we were trying to build a house, which is a very basic form of development, right? The development process. The SDGs represent a bill of materials, so like a list of what you need to build a house. What they don't do necessarily is give you the architectural drawings or the engineer's opinions, or they haven't necessarily done the land assessments, or understand the general regulation around which the building needs to be built. So in the city of Joburg has very fantastic regulations. And that's the fundamental flaw of the Sustainable Development Goals. Because we all understand that we need a house, but how are we going to build that house? And within what framework? But before we get to sustainable development, we've got to talk about equitable development. Right. Equitable development is the premise that we should develop without inhibiting anybody else's ability to develop. And we all know and can accept that economic development, as it has progressed over the last 200 years, has meant that one person's development means somebody else is not allowed to develop. And that gets us to the ultimate sort of juxtaposition of where we are. As much as we have all of these beautiful development theories, they're all premised on these very, very flawed assumptions. The first assumption of economics, for anybody that's done economics, even economics 1, knows that the first assumption of all economic modeling is the theory of rationality, that humans behave in a rational manner, which is very flawed. The second assumption in theory of rationality is that we have consistent opinions about what we prefer, which I know definitely for me is not true. And then the third premise of the theory of rationality is that in any given moment, faced with constrained circumstances, we will make the best decision that optimizes our future, which again is very untrue for most of us. And so that's where we struggle as the developing economies of the world, the emerging market, is that our development pathways have been set by somebody who doesn't necessarily understand the realities that we face. They have been imposed by academic institutions, largely led by the global north, based on lots of assumptions and theories about how humans exist and the intentions of humans and the requirements of humans to grow and develop. Right? We haven't done the difficult work of unpacking what it means to be African, what African economics means. And we know that 80% of this continent trades outside of the formal economy, which means that 80% of the economics on this continent exists outside of the mainstream modern economic theoretical frameworks. And that remains true for all sorts of economic activity, so education, agriculture, any kind of development that happens on this continent happens outside of our academic frameworks, which we haven't necessarily taken the time or made the effort to understand, which is a great travesty. But that's why this conversation is exciting. I'm going to stop.
Thank you so much, Tom. So before we move on to the next speaker, do you have any questions for our speaker at the moment? You are the one. Should they ask all the questions at the same time or one at a time?
One at a time.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Maybe I can bring my question.
Well, we have people online listening.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for a very intriguing presentation on the top. But there are few things that you raised that I want clarification on. You talked of equitable development and explained what equitable development is. But the definition you gave, to my knowledge, is similar to the sustainable development. So I want you to give a difference between sustainable development and equitable development. And also, I was happy to hear the theory of rationality. And another thing that also you actually raise, if one person develops, that means in reality, one person is not developing, which is a bit against the Gandhi theory or Gandhi principle of development, which says, actually, when you develop, you should also think of others that they should develop as well. It's actually totally against the one person developing and the other not developing. He said all of us should develop, and we have to strive to that point. So I'm just saying, where is that point equitable development? Where do we get that line where every one of us is developing? Thanks.
That's a great question. So the difference between equitable development and sustainable development is the time frame. So we speak to equitable development when we are developing now. So equitable development, by my definition, is development that does not impede your ability to develop right now in this moment. Sustainable development speaks to development that does not impede the future generation's ability to develop, right? So all of the aggregate of the activity that we are performing together right now shouldn't affect our kids or our grandkids from performing the same or similar activity in order to grow and develop. What's really interesting by your second point around the Gandhi principles is that in the global south, so not just on our continent, but also on the Asian continent, also in the South American continent, we accept as people from a social perspective that we do not exist in isolation of each other, right? So the principle of Ubuntu is like embedded in all of these global south traditions. So when we speak of my development, it is not singular, it's collective. And that is the underlying theory of, or the underlying principles that are embedded in what we call the informal economic systems and the informal social systems of the global south. And it's what needs to be elevated, in my opinion, because I think that as we progress now, as we move towards really wanting to attain a level of sustainable development for the future generations, that we can't look to historical models that have created development for others that has not been equitable and is fundamentally unsustainable. We have to look at different models. And I believe that those models exist already in the indigenous systems of the global south.
I suspect it's a very unfair question. But I mean, so we've seen, countries move from being totally underdeveloped to becoming really prosperous, and everybody, having this choice that you talk about. Do you think there's one thing, if you could think of one, and I know it's a system, right? So you can't just do one thing and expect amazing results. Do you think there's one thing that developing countries in general can do well, that would change, the system to a point where it kind of would develop in, right? So is there just one ingredient that really would make a difference if we did it well?
That's such a great question. So, and it comes with a story, so I apologize. I've been working in the field of development economics and implementing development solutions for 21 years. And when I started, I was the first person in my family to go to university. So you understand, when I started, I had this complete arrogance of being better than everyone around me, right? Because I went to university and I had all of these models and I was really clever. And so I implemented the development strategies that I learned from the textbooks. And the one thing that those of us that work in the development space don't talk about is that on average, we can expect a success rate of about 20% in any kind of economic development activity. And it's surprising for the scientists, but it's Pareto. The success rate, even in any private equity fund or anything kind of economics related, is around 20%. And we don't talk about it. And why is that? Why is the success rate of development about 20%? There's no shortage of money, much to people's surprise. It's because you can't force people, the individual or the collective, to develop. You can drive your kid to school, but you can't force them to attend class or to listen or to learn what they need to learn. And so the one ingredient that's lacking in our development pathways is that intrinsic motivation. And why is it lacking? So I spent the last kind of 10 years wondering this, why is it lacking? And again, my theory of probability, I'm not an academic, is that we are fundamentally disconnected from our identity, right? So we have subordinated our identity collectively as the global south to the narratives of the global north. So we want to follow their development pathway. We don't necessarily understand what our development pathway is or should be. And so I believe that the one trick to unlocking everything, and I think it will unlock everything, is if we collectively remembered who we are and where we come from.
Thank you so much. We raised a lot of points and I will really hand them. So, no, we're not taking another question. So just hold on to those questions. We'll come back again to ask more questions to her specifically if you need more answers. But for now, we'll move on to the next panelist. So to sort of kind of like give more context, on Wednesday when we had our session with the African Astronomical Society, one of the things that was like raised and put out there was astrotourism. So to sort of kind of discuss the role of tourism in development, we've invited the Deputy Director, Acting Director of the Department of Tourism, Dr. Letitia Jacobs, to sort of kind of tell us what the role of tourism is and maybe also introduce us to the concept of astrotourism.
Good morning, everybody. That was a hard step to follow, I must say. But I think one of the misconceptions about tourism is just people just go somewhere, right? People just travel somewhere, they've got nothing to do, or they've got plenty of money. But tourism is actually so important in development. And just to touch on to the first speaker about the choice, the freedom of choice. You know, before people couldn't travel, reasons is we don't have enough money, we don't have time, we've got kids, etc. But again, tourism now enables us to cross boundaries, we cross cultures, we cross lifestyles, there's an exchange of story, there's an exchange of uniqueness. And as you've mentioned, you know, our unique story, and tourism is actually one of those things that crosses that bridge. And again, when it comes to development of tourism in South Africa, predominantly, where do people go? Table Mountain, Kruger National Park. And we want to change that landscape. We've got a beautiful Karoo in the Northern Cape province. And what is the Northern Cape? Has a lot of sky, a lot of space, a lot of in vast distances. And one of the things that we've seen post-COVID is trends have changed. People no longer just want to sit at the beach and get a tan. They want to experience something meaningful. And astrotourism is one of those unique things, connecting themselves, with the universe, with the different culture. And how do we now also include our local communities in our most remote spaces? How do we develop Carnarvon? I remember during the PhD study, somebody said, why would you look at Carnarvon? Gosh, there's nothing going on there, and it's so far to get there. Let's give them a reason to move out to these remote areas. And how do we encourage our local communities to get involved? Please tell your stories of how you interpret the night sky. And this is truly how astrotourism is brought about, because people want a meaningful travel when they come. Yes, South Africa is a long-haul destination, so our competitors are New Zealand, Australia, and Chile. Again, we are still in a competitive advantage just of how we can see the celestial objects from our South African sky, from where we are situated, because we can see the most densest and interesting part of the Milky Way and with our naked eye. So again, I remember Sivu said, Sutherland needs help. Yes, you know, people go to Sutherland, yes, to see the snow, I think, but it's because of SALT that's there, the Southern African Large Telescope, that has actually, astronomy now has crossed the bridge with tourism. And this is a very unique a relationship that we have with science, with astronomy in itself, to say we have the science, how do we get tourism, and how do we create access to the public, and to have our kids also saying, one day I want to be an astronomer, one day I want to be a scientist. And now tourism provides a unique opportunity when a couple and a young kid just wants to have a holiday, they'll take their kid to Sutherland so that they can see the night sky, and all of a sudden, the universe changes, their outlook of the world changes. And tourism is that vehicle that actually ensures that astronomy, science, and paleontology, we are busy even building a dinosaur center in the Golden Gate National Park, where fossilized embryos were found while they were blasting through a mountain to put up a road. Again, such unique findings that we have in South Africa, even Fraserburg with dinosaur footprints. We don't talk about these things because we are not marketing it, we're not developing it. And part of development is also once you, I don't know if I'm sure many of you have come from wherever you are, and especially the Cape Town's brought the heat, but you can see clearly the road difference from the Cape Town to the Eastern Cape. The road infrastructure differs, and how do we cross that equal development across provinces into rural areas so that you don't need a 4x4 to get to Fraserburg. You can actually take your vehicle. It's becoming accessible. Also with Wi-Fi connectivity, once you hit the Kalahari, you are cut off from the entire world. But what do people want to say? They want to post, I'm here. And how do you now interconnect the world with the space, like Kalahari, like Carnarvon, like Sutherland? And again, tourism, again, invaluable, 1.8 million visitors just in this first quarter. So we already see we are recovering from COVID. We're already hoping that we will actually meet our 2019 statistics and even surpass it by the end of this financial year, because people want to travel again. They've been kept in their home the whole time. They want to be outside. They want to have open spaces. They want to engage. They want to see something new. And again, tourism needs to evolve as the trends evolve. And I'm going to stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tia. You have any questions?
Thank you very much, Doc. I think maybe I'll talk a lot because you are touching things that are closer to my heart. There's a study that we did about astrotourism, where we find out that it's a tourism for the elite. I wanted to actually be in the room about that. Why do we say it's a tourism for the elite? It's a tourism for you either have a knowledge about astronomy or you are in astronomy space and understand what is happening in astronomy. But a man, ordinary man on the street, cannot be really ignited by really being in astrotourism, because you don't understand. He doesn't even care about the things we need to raise, the things that we have raised and all that. And then the issue here is how do we make, because it's part of a tourism and a very important part. How do we now bring this to an ordinary man rather than it stays there with those that have understand? Either your father is astronomy or you understand astronomy things. But the person that wants to go out, instead of going to a beach in Durban or in Cape Town and then go to SARAO and see these things, how do we ignite that? Because we grapple with that igniting, this bringing it to an ordinary person on the streets, other than the astronomers.
Okay. Okay. Anton would like to address that question specifically.
I think when the economist spoke, she alluded to this. Part of what we want to do is we want to remember who we are. We've begun to develop astrotourism in these communities that you're referring to. And what we've done, one of the primary things we did is we gave the stories back to the owners of these stories. So if you, in Carnarvon, there's 6 celebrities, and these are the Carnarvon astrogods. These guys have been profiled literally from South Africa to the end of Sweden. And it's not an elitist thing anymore. It's 6 unemployed youth from the community who's using the stories that they've been telling for millennia in that area as part of the astrotourism thing that they're giving. And it's not an elitist thing anymore. It belongs to that community. The community tells the stories and it's community driven. So we're learning a lot of lessons as we go on, and with Letitia and SAAO and everyone else, we're still developing this. But you're right, it used to be an elitist thing with astronomers having the knowledge, but in Africa, there's multiple indigenous astronomies. And by owning that, you're moving the focus and you're focusing. We know that Carnarvon astrogods are never going to be the best astronomers, but they're the best storytellers. They'll tell you how the Milky Way was created. They'll tell you about the meteoric cloud and the eland that goes grazing there. So through initiatives like these, in collaboration with tourism, we're developing it so that it's something that belongs to all. So, thanks.
Yes, just to also add on to what Anton said as well, like us at the OED, we've developed resources that people who live in rural communities can actually start their own astrotourism businesses. So when you say astrotourism, you don't necessarily have to have a background in astronomy in order for you to create an experience under the night sky. So we encourage people to either do storytelling under the stars, have an experience where you go hiking, you have dinner under the stars. It basically does not necessarily have to do with someone telling you this is what's up there in the sky, or this is what this constellation is, but just basically creating experiences that involve the night sky as well as like the naturally dark communities. I will take one more question and then we'll move on to the next panelist.
So can I just respond to before the thought escaped me? Astrotourism it requires a night stay because it means you can't experience the stars in the day. So our key is to get our accommodation establishments involved. And they was like, we have a tour during the day, they see, have a safari. But what do tourists do at night? There's nothing, activities. And astrotourism now creates an added offering for accommodation establishments now. So again, improving businesses, but also awareness. People are not aware. I'm a city girl, but how I got involved into astrotourism is when I was a little girl, I thought the moon is following me. You know, so it doesn't matter if you are in the Karoo or in the city, we are all connected to the stars, but we are not sharing that story. We are not actually really creating awareness on astrotourism, a resource, the sky, which is absolutely free. All we need to do is preserve it. We need to keep our dark skies, the dark night skies dark. And again, that is where regulation is coming in, and we have an engagement with Dark Sky International. How do we actually ensure that we lower light pollution? So yes, people don't necessarily travel for astrotourism as their primary. It's almost by accident. Oh, I'm in Sutherland. Oh, by accident I can see the stars. You know, and that is by accident is actually changing people's perception, and that is not something that will happen overnight. Special interest tourism is very niche orientated. 3 people that stays for 3 nights in a rural area does make an economic impact to a small rural area because of they need accommodation, they need a restaurant, they need to eat somewhere, they need activities, and they need a vehicle. So all those things on the tourism value chain now actually strengthens that particular rural area.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Isn't he joined? So it's my first month. So I think what he realizes is that astronomy has got a lot of the whole field has got a lot of transfer of skills. I was never interested in the sky. What got me interested in that analysis. So I found that if there's different sets of data that are out there, so I found myself in astronomy because of the two data analysis. Moreover, and beyond that, also my religion, I'm a strong believer. I wanted to understand in my country that this will say who created how it was everything. So it also touched base on religion. So just wanted to thank you.
Thank you very much. No more question. Save it for later, Charles. Remember it, write it down or something. So thank you so much, Letitia. So she's the first few speakers have mentioned Sutherland, Carnarvon. To get a bit more about what's so special about Sutherland and why it's been mentioned, we have Dr. Rosalind Hilton, who is acting managing director at the South African Astronomical Observatory. So she'll tell us a bit more about this observatory and also just the impact that the observatory has in the local community.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. As Rachel said, I'm Ross Skelton. I'm acting managing director of SAAO, the South African Astronomical Observatory. And we've had our observatory site in the Karoo since the 1970s, when it was realized that we're not actually going to be able to see much in the night sky from Cape Town any longer, or from Johannesburg, where the old observatories were based. And so the observatory moved out into the Karoo because it's such a beautiful, dark place. And In the early 2000s, the SALT telescope was built, the Southern African Large Telescope, and it's been in regular operations since 2011. So that's our flagship facility. And since then, particularly the astrotourism in the area has really grown. The number of visitors to Sutherland has grown as a result of SALT and this marketing of this flagship science facility in South Africa. So to give you a little bit of background about how Sutherland has changed over the years, before SALT was built, there were 2 or 3 guest houses in Sutherland. Now there are about 40, more than 40. And then in addition, there's a whole lot of guest farms in the area. Yeah, so there's been huge development, largely as a result of SALT and the investments in SALT, some of the marketing that's gone along with that. I think in addition to tourism, there's some other aspects of development that we can talk about from the observatory side. So we put quite a lot of effort in at SAAO into our science engagement programs to try and connect with society, use some of the tools of astronomy for development, for education in particular. So we have a lot of school programs. Our science engagement department does teacher training across the country. Particularly, they've become known as the support for the Earth and Beyond curriculum. We have a lot of school visits to Sutherland and to Cape Town. A lot of public open nights where we share what we do as astronomers, but also some of the engineering aspects. So there are a lot of different activities, a lot of career guidance that's driven from the observatories. I also wanted to mention our Cape Town Visitor Centre. So we've recently opened phase 1 of our Cape Town Visitor Centre. We have a lot of development still to do in our visitor centres. I think the Sutherland one has been there a long time and needs a lot of work still, a lot of redevelopment to really tap into the potential of astrotourism and enable it. But our Cape Town one particularly has tried to connect with some of the stories of the night sky from a South African perspective. So we've got a beautiful starry night ceiling. And there was a project a while ago to look at the constellations as described by some of the Sand people in the late 1800s and draw that we sort of wound the sky back to what it looked like at that time when those stories were recorded, and then tried to figure out what the constellations were. They were talking about their own constellations, and so those are mapped on our ceiling. So I think that's also a very important aspect that we have to bring in our Sutherland Visitor Centre to really create that ownership and bring in the local people and their stories into what we do. It is to Ross, right, Sean?
Well, it's sort of to a wide range of an audience of people that are sitting there.
We're not talking to the general.
Okay, it's not necessarily general. It's not general. I mean, it's touching to what I guess the economist said and what the teacher said for tourism, and and then as well what Ross said, about stuff that observations we bring in Sutherland. Just thinking, we say that for people to sort of reach this level of development, they need to believe also in what they do. And for example, with tourism, you had the whole concept of the short left initially, where you motivate South Africa to take a short left and you can just drive somewhere and it can make it into a holiday. There's a missed opportunity. I think we have to sort of make tourism also drive the science in the future scientists as well. And I think one of the opportunities is how we also communicate the tourism of astronomy. The short left thing was really great because it puts travel and tourism into the face of South Africans. Everyone just knew when that yellow advert came on TV, it's the short left thing. Could we have similar campaigns like that, going into the future that not only communicate, that tourism, but also communicate that, the astronomy as well? Then kids know that too. Actually, I got a look at, at the night sky. Even a child in Southern got a look at, at the night sky. It's the same night sky that another child somewhere else is seeing. I can actually visit that child and also be part of their world as well. We are sort of put that, into their mind. And I think that that's one way that you can sort of drive this whole astrotourism thing, and hopefully that people are willing to sort of invest in that sort of thing in the future.
Would anyone like to comment on what Charles just said?
I need to comment very quickly because I know we're running out of time. Marketing material for astrotourism is almost zero at this stage. And I think we are having a conversation, I think with Jive Media, that we realize we really need to showcase not only domestic tourism, but international tourists as well about our skies. As we know, 50% of the world population can no longer see the night sky. So it is a unique opportunity for us as South Africa to leverage of that. So we're having discussion with our marketing agency, which is South African Tourism, to actually build on that. Again, our strategy is only at the infant stage, even though we have implemented already. But you can only market a product if it's ready. So we have a lot to do to look at our supply. Again, where are all the products across the country, not only in Karoo, because this is a national strategy. And to actually plot them in, we do have a very baseline map of where this product lies. But again, we need to look at the quality, we need to look at the service delivery, etc., the quality of storytelling. It needs to be sellable, and then we can market. So market and promotion is really the last facet of tourism development. So let's make sure that our supply is right and that we speak to the demand of what visitors want, and then we can market and promote further.
Thank you. Maybe one brief comment as well. I think you reminded me, I think one of the things that's so important is to build the pride in our scientific facilities. So that's part of this astrotourism. It is much broader than just the observatories and the formal scientific facilities, but South Africa has so much to offer, and I think this is one way of also building that intrinsic pride in what we have and what we offer the world.
All right, thank you. Do you have any other questions from the audience? No? Okay. Well, in addition to the South African Astronomical Observatory, we also have the Square Kilometre Array that is under the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory. And to tell us a bit more about this is the director, Ms. Ponso Rupini.
Good morning and thank you everyone. As our program director indicated, I work for the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory. At the fortunate position to work with people that enable this amazing image to happen. So we've actually radio astronomy in South Africa started in the 1960s, and NASA put a dish in Hartbeespoort, which was part of the deep space mission. And when they left South Africa, they donated that dish, and it became our first radio astronomy dish that South Africa had. It's an old 26-meter dish that literally falling apart and everyone's crying, please do not destroy it. But it's really been operating that long. It still does science as part of the VLBI project, with, connected to other facilities, single dish facilities like that. So we are based in Carnarvon. We developed the mega telescope as well, which is a 64-dish array. As I mentioned, it produces these amazing images. But including that, we've linked into development. We've worked from the beginning to make sure that we don't put an amazing instrument in the Karoo and no South African can use it. So right from the beginning, we had a human capital development program. South Africa used, at the beginning of that project, used to have about 3.5 astronomers. Last year, we celebrated 5 years of MeerKAT. And one of the major highlights for me was seeing Precious, who is one of our students we funded from undergrad, who is now a lecturer at UKZN, giving a talk. And the first person to ask a question was Mpati, who is also one of our students that we funded, 2 Black females having a conversation about the latest discoveries in radio astronomy. I mean, just that already tells you the impact that this project has had. And looking around that audience, when I first started in science, government-related science activities, I worked for the DST, and I was working on setting up the South African Space Agency, and had to engage with stakeholders who were involved in space, spoke to people doing the satellite side, people doing the astronomy side. Every room that I walked into was primarily filled with white-bearded men. And to look back now, last week we had a conference in the Eastern Cape. We have an annual postgraduate conference, and we had about 20 postdocs, 49 PhDs, and 40 masters. All of these people are working now in astronomy. And I mean, I think that even if we do nothing else, that has indicated how you can use science infrastructure to actually drive development. In addition to this, we also have programs where we, and by the way, I mentioned the science side, but obviously to build a telescope this complex, you need engineers. So part of our programs also include developing engineering skills. And we work, by the way, there's engineers in the room. We have a booth on the other side. We are always looking for brilliant people. Please go talk to some of the SARAO people at the booth. We have one person here also who's an engineer at SARAO. He will happily tell you how amazing it is to work for that project. So besides that, the focusing on the high-end skills, we also, when you have an infrastructure like that, it has to be maintained. Now you have to develop the people that are needed, technicians, artisans, that will work to make sure that the telescope continues to work. So we also have programs that are targeted at that. We didn't stop at that because the instrument is in the Karoo. We realized that there is no way that we would go about this, making it an extractive process. When mines come in, they take whatever they need and they walk away. We wanted to make sure that this telescope has a lasting impact on the communities around where we live, so that we train people that we can hire, provide jobs to, and make sure that the project itself is sustainable, but the community starts feeling the impact of our work as well. So we have school programs. We hire a teacher at the one high school in the area that has math and science. We make sure that they have good teachers there. Any student in the area that has the interest in studying science and has developed enough basic skills in math and science, we also offer them bursaries to go to this high school, so that when they qualify to get into university, they can also become astronomers. And we are almost there where we would have a PhD that has come out of that community. These are people who will continue to go home, interact with young people in that area, and ensure that they have these choices, like they are open to these opportunities that they otherwise would most likely have never heard of. As part of this also, because we are building, there's a lot of infrastructure development. We've built the road, we've upgraded the electricity supply. We also had made sure that we do not negatively impact the environment, did a detailed environmental impact assessment that has guidelines on the things we should and shouldn't do to not unfairly or unfavorably disturb the environment that we are in. I know that it's not completely possible not to impact it, but you know, a telescope also requires quietness, unlike Ross's one that requires a little light. So ours requires a radio quietness, and everything we carry, the watches make a lot of noise for this telescope. And so the good thing about the fact that it has to be as quiet as possible, so not too much human activities in the area, means that now we've converted the actual site into a national park, and it allows certain parks, for instance, to do unique research in the area, because now you have an area that can almost be preserved in the best possible way, and then you can do a whole lot of activities there. So yeah, that's what we get to work on. Thanks.
Also the light for the Soul telescope. So how do communities feel about this when you tell them that they can't have Wi-Fi and they can't have lights because you need it to be as dark as possible, you need to be, not have noise around?
You had to start with that question. So firstly, by the way, the reason the site was selected is because it's already parked, right? So the Northern Cape, vast spaces, small communities, very far from, and the towns are generally also really small. So you naturally did not have a lot of radio noise anyway in the area. And then government developed a yeah. So there's an act that actually protects the area where the telescopes are based, to make sure that we can maintain the quality of the site for doing astronomy. And what that requires is that we engage with the community to find alternative solutions for connectivity, for to be able to have a cell coverage, which was not there in any case. So we've implemented some solutions, including providing for people to access television programs, to get internet access, and that in itself also drives technology development, because now you have to figure out how else do you allow people to have all of these tools that we enjoy without necessarily impacting the ability to do this amazing science on the side.
On the light pollution side, I think we have to constantly engage with the community, with all the stakeholders, to try and keep the darkness around Sutherland. So some of the challenges have been wind farm developments in the area. We have to engage with the wind farms, to try and prevent them putting up big lights. I think more recently also security challenges in the area. So some of the farmers, just want spotlights to enhance their security. So we have to work with them to say, you actually don't need it to shine up, but give them alternative options that would enable us to continue doing our science and keep the community safe, and all of that.
Okay, I will take one question from the audience.
So if there is a question, I'll yield, because I have a bias that I must clear, that I work for the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory. But my comment, which is not a question, is I just wanted to congratulate these projects for always keeping the communities and the people at the center of what we're doing. I think that, many of us have gone to many conferences and many conversations about things, and the people have always been an afterthought, mostly driven by, the big conversations, and people are still asking today, what is the impact? Well, these projects with SALT, with the SK and Meerkat and Cat 7, it was always at the center.
And this is why we have what we have today. I mean, we have resources, full-time people whose job it is to just take care of the warm bodies, like myself. I'm not in this job, but this project has been able to do things like that and even keep other people in the country, right? Things like brain drain and so forth have been able to be addressed by saying this is a worthy cause, in terms of science, communication, science engagement, and so forth. That I just wanted to congratulate us for doing this and doing it well. And again, exporting this to the rest of the world, because we are now an example of this is what you do and this is how you do it. So thank you. It's bonus time, so I want to say that, yeah, I just didn't want to educate. I think you basically second up to your
Thank you very much to the astronomers and astrophysicists. You're doing a great job. So take what I offer in that spirit. The first is just a comment about development economics, perhaps to you, the old tag, thinking about the work of Hirschman many years ago and how one really understands what works and what doesn't in economics. And this takes you into the whole public relations that you engage with so very well, because please don't set yourselves up to fail. Don't promise what you can't deliver, and use your political protection to push those critics away who ask unreasonable things of you. Having said that, thanks to the net which works here, I was able to answer my own question, but I'm going to share it with you. The HSRC has just published the results of the 22-2023 R&D survey. And so I asked it, what's the expenditure on astronomy? And what comes back is, it's not a searchable question. Now that really raises an interesting question for me, because the same survey covers things like nanotechnology and IKS, but here's astronomy, which has taken us right to the world stage, and why is it not being qualified? Because I wanted to ask you, what percentage of our national spend on R&D is going toward astrophysics astronomy? It's in the order of 900 million rand, but I'm open to correction, but it isn't quantified there. Maybe you want to engage with the parties and say, hang on, people, we need that information, we want to share it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone like to address the comment question?
I guess it's like a comment rather than a question, right? So I agree with you. I think we need to make sure that it's quantified. It probably will show people how much we've spent, but we actually did the economic impact assessment of the project since the beginning. And I was quite surprised by the results of how well this project has actually, delivered. And I think that that's part of what we should do. Actually, talk about how much we spend and how much economic development is generated as well. Because I think that is something useful for people to understand why a developing country like South Africa should spend money on astronomy.
Thank you. So finally, we'll get to the gentleman who let the ladies go first. So we have Mr. Kevin Govender, who will be talking about the Office of Astronomy and Development, and also just giving us an idea of how astronomy can be used as a tool for development. Kevin?
Cool. Thanks very much, and thanks. It's a privilege to be seated on this panel. I mean, I think one interesting thing that Mokolo was saying is the commitment. I mean, you've got here the two directors of the two major astronomy facilities in the country, and you can see the commitment to society and the impact. I've been in many astronomy conferences around the world, and you don't hear the directors talk as passionately or as knowledgeable about the impact that they have on communities and society. And this is something, you're talking about exporting stuff. this is what we have exported to the rest of the world. So under the International Astronomical Union, it's a partnership with the National Research Foundation and the International Astronomical Union and DSKI. And it's hosted, it's a project called the Office of Astronomy for Development. And it's hosted in South Africa, partly because the International Astronomical Union, which is a global body of professional astronomers, recognized South Africa's leadership in using the field of astronomy to impact on society. And they recognize it because of activities that were driven at SAAO, at SARAO, in trying to use astronomy to impact on society. What we've heard today, you know, there's been a lot of talk about astronomy tourism and stuff, but I think you'll notice it goes beyond that. It goes to the education, to the outreach, to the human capacity development, to the technology that we've been developing. All these aspects of astronomy, it's because this is a special field. Of all the sciences, this is a field that touches on it pushes the limits of our science and technology, pushes the limits of our human understanding. It forces us to solve problems that's just unimaginable. I mean, when you look at the night sky, you see these tiny little points of light. How on earth do you figure out that tiny point of light is actually a massive ball of gas, a million times bigger than this planet? How do you figure out that in the dark patches that you see, there's actually galaxies with billions of stars, billions of suns like our sun, that there could be planets out there? To figure all those things out, we need the technology to build the telescopes. We need the data skills. When you're talking about data skills, you have to be able to analyze, to process these things. The work of the Office of Astronomy for Development is to take all those skills and techniques and methodologies and infrastructure that is built to explore. We build them because we want to explore the universe. We want to, push our curiosity, we want to satisfy our curiosity of where we are in this universe. Is there any life out there? Where did the universe come from? Where is it going? All these things that we produce along the way, we want to make sure that it impacts on society. And so that's where our work comes in. And astronomy tourism is one big aspect because it's about, we hear the term rural economic development. What do rural communities have that the urban communities don't? It's this clear night sky. It's a resource. It's something that if we can connect that resource to economic development, then we can stimulate rural economic development. And so that's why it's a very very important aspect to us. But we are an international office. We don't work mainly in South Africa or anything like that. We work mainly outside of South Africa. But we try to learn the lessons from South Africa and export this to the rest of the world. So we want to start astronomy tourism programs in all parts of the world, in South America, in India, in Asia, and the rest of Africa, wherever there are rural communities with clear night skies. We want to help them to start these programs. But that's one aspect. Another big aspect of what we do is looking at astronomy for mental health. And this might sound strange, but we've been working with psychologists about the positive impact on your mental health when you go out to the Northern Cape and take some time away from cell phone signal, away from the bright lights, and just spend some time, looking at the night sky. And this has already been shown to have a positive impact. And my colleague Dominic there, he's working with psychologists to develop tools that will help people all over the world in terms of positive mental health problems. Another aspect, our colleague there mentioned data skills. Absolutely, astronomy has so much data skills, and we want to capture those. So we've got a third project looking at taking those data skills, but also using the infrastructure, the cloud computing infrastructure that we have within astronomy to analyze development data. the same computers that we use and the same software that we use to analyze the data from telescopes and stars. How can we use it to analyze infectious disease data? How can we use it to analyze population data? So trying to apply these skills, but also to develop skills in other fields. And we've got lots of projects. We fund projects all around the world. There's an annual call. Any of you can apply for funding as long as there is some aspect of astronomy that can be used to impact on development. So we funded over 200 projects reaching over 100 countries around the world, and it's all coordinated from South Africa. It's a whole field now, almost you can call it of astronomy for development, and it's being led from here. Can I say one more? The third aspect that astronomy touches on, why it's such a special science, is culture. Some people have mentioned this already, but you've got a science that is so deeply rooted in all of our cultures. I'm sure everyone, you go ask your grandparents about stories about the stars and stuff. I tell people often, like, I grew up in rural KZN, and we had beautiful night skies, but they always told us, don't count the stars because you get warts. And so we never went outside and looked at the sun. So some of the superstitions are not nice because I lost that around this night. But we have a connection. We have a connection to the sun, the moon, the stars. And the curiosity that our ancestors have had to try and wonder what's out there. It's the same curiosity that drives us now. We don't have to separate the modern astronomy that we do now from the same curiosity that our great grandparents had in wondering about why the stars are moving across the sky and things like that. That is a powerful thing. And when it comes down to that one development thing, and I like the way you describe it, how do you make people develop themselves? What better field than astronomy to inspire people with the bigger picture, to inspire people to think beyond the reliance on social grants and the reliance on government, and to think that I can reach for the stars, that I should embrace the opportunities that DSTI, that DTI, that tourism, the opportunities that our government offers is not just opportunities in the form of handouts, it's opportunities in the form of there's ways of developing ourselves. If we can inspire them, then I think we can address that one big thing.
Thank you so much. Want to ask questions to everyone again. They really hang up the
Good morning. I'm Brian from the South African Institute of Physics. And the SIP is working on physics for development. I think we've been engaged with the 08 in terms of our Physics in My Village project, different districts. So my question is around the lessons that you have learned that we can take, because there is this push to say we need to stop working in silos within this development. We need to work across the different arms of government and across the different disciplines that we have got. So in terms of your development projects, for example, your astro guides training, your Internet of Things, and then the education pipeline, especially from the ECD to secondary school level, what lessons have you learned? When we are going to implement this, for example, in our physics for development, in the partnerships that we want to do in the Eastern Cape and so forth, what lessons can we take from what you have done? And in terms of co-creation and acceptance by the communities, for them to accept these things when they are coming. Because, for example, when we are taking physics to the community, they think it's something that is abstract, right? But it's something that they're using in their everyday life. And the moment you take it to the village, then they say, oh, this is how it's going to benefit us. So in terms of acceptance, then sustainability, after you have been into the project, are they sustainable going forward? Or when you get in and then get out, then the project crumbles. And then in terms of multidisciplinarity, working with other people from outside our physics discipline, those in development, to say, if we are studying solar panels and their efficiency, go install in a community, they use that to pump water and so forth, then the development people can come in and evaluate the impact of that in that community. So I don't know, in terms of what you have been working on, how has that been going? So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, you go ahead.
Sure, you have a big question. I think we need to sit down together. So I can't give you all the lessons now, but we've got lots of insights that we've developed, and we try to capture all the lessons from every project that we fund and publish that openly. So we have got a bank of resources of lessons of every different type of project. But maybe I can say overall, one of the big lessons is about bridging inequality. And when I say that, it's because when we want to start a business, an initiative or something, we can't, as you say, like go in and come out and things like that. There must be a bridge between like now with SARP, as the organization, you're on one side of the inequality line, and bridging that involves mentorship, involves long-term commitment so that projects can be sustainable. And that can be done when you basically inspire people at both ends of our country's inequality to see each other, to come together. And what we've seen in Sutherland, in Carnarvon, is where you've got this multi-million rand projects sitting down with the communities and trying to co-create projects, activities. On the point about community acceptance, I remember hosting this community meeting, and the starting point is not about our agenda. It's about what stories do you know about the night sky? It's starting to the conversation about astronomy and about it's about recognizing each other as human beings. Whether you are part of that big fancy observatory or whether you're living in the community where the long drop toilets are not long enough and you have challenges in the, with basic sanitation, everyone sits around the table and shares stories of their own humanity. And that connection, I think, is the most critical thing. Because without that connection and without that trust, I think projects should happen.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to comment?
Can I just add just a small thing on how to make things work is my brother always says, let the main thing be the main thing, right? Each one has their own mandate. But when you pull together resources and when you put manage together, you can actually move forward. So what we've done with the Astro guys was SARAO partnered with the Northern Cape Department of Economic and Tourism to train those guys. So they pull funds together, resources together to move forward. Again, with the astrotourism strategy, we have developed the astrotourism governance body. So now you get a very weird pile of people together. Tourism, astronomy, radio astronomy, because they don't want people. So we said, oh, let's build a visitor center so that you can have access so that for the people, for the public to actually enjoy and understand radio astronomy. You need a vehicle, and what is that vehicle that you're going to use? And that is what you need to determine to move forward. But also, it's pulling together. You need to pull together. And I know with government, sometimes it's very stringent. Each one has their own thing. This one is moving that way. This one has limited budget. Budget is always an issue. But once you pull together, then the main thing can be the main thing, because now you all have a vision of developing rural areas, of ensuring skills are developed, jobs are created. Maybe we can only fund for 2 guides, but the other one can fund for 10. Now you've got 12 guides, etc. So it's again pulling resources together, pulling people who are passionate about whatever area or moving forward, again with the astronomy, with the science forward, but again coming together and really committing, and that's a difficult part to get that people together to be committed, especially with local government. They will always tell you, sorry, we don't have the budget for that. But as long as your project is in the IDP, so you do need to have an understanding of what is the role of local economic development and local government. South Africa is actually one of the forefronts in developing local economic development, but our rural areas are still not developing. Why? We're lacking implementation. And again, that is where you need to cross a bridge between local government, district, and national government. And that is what we are trying to do with the astrotourism, to actually set the pathway, saying we are going to do something different, we're going to go the long way. And even with the strategy, we're going through cabinet, doing the hard the hard labor, going it the right way, so that we make sure that actually we have development that is sustainable but also equitable. Thank you.
It's such an interesting conversation because I would regard myself a curious person who just happens to be interested in everything that has to do with trying to figure out how things work. So I really enjoy how the astronomy has been made accessible and the integration with astronomy and culture. I would also just like to ask, in terms of co-creation and okay, so in terms of engaging the curious and multidisciplinary collaborations, I would like to ask, are there ecosystems or networks that exist that evolve beyond the typical science field in terms of, for instance, the astrotourism? I think that's such an important factor. Is there potential to integrate astrotourism, build a network of key places where astrotourism exists and drive tourism, local tourism in the country so that kids know, you know, on your holiday from Cape Town to Eastern Cape, you can stop in Graaff-Reinet and there's something exciting for you to do. Because currently, I think the challenge that we face in society is that there's a lack of third places for kids. You know, everyone's just aggressively online, and then from the moment you hit pre-teenhood to your young age, there isn't kind of like a youthful integration where you can be a curious young person. So yeah, I'd like to ask, are there networks that exist? Is there potential to establish these networks? And yeah, I think also in terms of the healing aspects that Kevin spoke to, oh sorry, it's the lady next to her. Sorry ma'am, I forgot your name. But how about, it would be really cool to create a retreat of sorts where instead of going to a health facility and, you know, booking yourself into a psych ward for 4 weeks if you need a break, you're able to go and do art therapy, do astrotourism, and kind of engage in the indigenous communities. So is there potential to develop these networks? How do I plug in and play? And yeah, and amplify the great work that you guys are doing. I also think there's a lack of edutainment in terms of putting yourself out there. And I mean, you can't do all the work. So how do we plug and play?
Okay, so we will address that question and then also add our closing remarks because we
Okay. I think we've touched on this earlier also with marketing. We need to get the supply ready before we can market. But they are already existing. I know in close to the Cedarburg, there's where you can do star bathing. Beautiful, still very luxury resorts and places where you can actually relax and just engage. But those are aspects, the supply that we still need to develop, especially with the storytelling as well. Local communities play a very big part in it, but we haven't even reached really a starting point on it. I think we have with the Astro Guides, we've learned our lessons, we will move forward from that. But again, as a governance body, we will have to sit down and really see how are we moving forward with this particular special interest niche market and move as a country, as a competitive destination. And I think as in my closing remarks as well, we can have a conversation with this as well, but we will have an astrotourism workshop again within the next quarter. Where are we now? December, between January, February, March, where we will have anybody that's interested so that we can actually assign roles and responsibilities, who's bringing what to the table, so that we can actually see how we can move South Africa forward as a lead astrotourism destination.
Okay, so now going to Kevin and then Ross. Yeah. And then we'll skip to Ponzo and then I have one last question for you as a tourism comment as well.
the most important person.
Yeah.
Just on that point, and links to what Dan was asking about interdisciplinarity. I think our Office of Astronomy for Development tries to fundamentally be an interdisciplinary space, right? And you asked about the retreats. So Dominic there, who's doing our tech support there as well, but he's a social worker who's working at our office driving the Astronomy for Mental Health project and looking at the feasibility of a mental health retreat in place as well. So there is a space for these conversations, but we have to have those interdisciplinary conversations to figure out what's best for the world. At the end of the day, we want to use astronomy to make the world a better place, and we can't do it alone.
30 seconds, Ross.
Thank you for a very interesting discussion. And just to reiterate, I think from the SAO side, we're very committed to using astronomy in all its possible ways and making an impact on the societies that we serve.
I mean, there's a lot I didn't cover. There's this booklets on a stand, so it has everything from the science, the human capital development, from the amazing robotics program we do in the community. So we'll check it out and talk to the guys on the stand. And if you're ever in Los Angeles at the museum, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, one of our images is actually displayed. That's how global our products have become. So.
Okay, so Kalnisha, your question is, do you think that astronomy can be used for
So as you said, so the last 10 years we've been exploring ways to unlock intrinsic motivation. And in all of our projects, the one thing that we do before we start in the initial sort of public participation stakeholder engagement space is remind people who they are. Africa was here first, right? Southern Africa is the cradle of all human existence. Development started here. We are all born of the stars, just like our ancestors before us, right? The universe had to conspire for me to be here right now, for any of us to be here right now. So, right, it's our time to shine. I think that the challenge that we have is that the regulators, policymakers, people defining the strategy are chasing the elusive developed goal. So we're going to have to compete against electrification and ubiquitous access to Wi-Fi and those sorts of big goals that the policymakers have made. But I think if we remember who we are and we understand what our value is, we'll be able to change their mind.
All right, let's take all of our panelists.
The OED has been envisioned in the exhibition hall. SARAO and SAAO are by the NRF stand, and then Kalishna and Letitia will be somewhere around the exhibition. Somewhere around the exhibition. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to keep the conversation going with all of you all. Thank you.